The mockery.
Denmark will shoot first and ask questions later.
The Home Ministry needs to take an action.
Tariffs and economic sanctions. Welcome back to the evening show by the Explicit. Seems like we should shift our focus from Epstein files to the Trump files, because trust me, it's good shit. Ask Mark Carney, it's better than the Canadian weed. These two share a common ground, the Epstein and the Trump files. Apart from their predatory nature, of course, the Epstein and Trump files both have letters. The famous birthday card, and one where the happily president doesn't seem pleased because he doesn't have a trophy this time, when he so badly desires the Nobel. Trump wrote in a letter to Norwegian Prime Minister Jonas Gahr that since he stopped 8 wars, he deserved a Nobel Prize. Not only this, he stated that owning Greenland is in the world's favor. Besides, how does Denmark own it anyway? Because even America has boat landing in Greenland. And he ended the letter by stating that since he did more for NATO than any other president, now it's NATO time. It feels that childhood of President Trump was in despair because he never received return gifts from the parties, which might explain his activities with Epstein too. Anyway, I don't need that visual right now. The interesting part here comes with the chronology now. Earlier, Venezuelan activist and leader Machado gave her Nobel to Trump, whose picture was posted by the White House. When you look at this picture carefully, you'll see something similar. Remember how our parents literally phrased us with the chocolates to just make us stop crying? This nostalgic image really pulls up some memories. The MAGA gang must be sure of one thing: they are not making America great again. In fact, there is a dent in their philosophy. I'll call it D&T, Dialogue, News, Trade, which is detrimental to American economy. The Europeans first tried to dialogue as a part of diplomacy. Since nothing happened with that, they tried to pull this letter into news. And if this doesn't stop here, we know that there will be a trade war between Europe and America. Speaking of the trade war, let's focus on the Trump's threat to impose tariffs on 10% on all goods from Denmark, Norway, Sweden, France, Germany, UK, Netherlands, and Finland, making 25% in total tariff if an agreement is not reached by June 1. Since President Trump has called the Greenland a major security concern for Americans, I'd call that the only reason why Trump is after Greenland is that he didn't receive a Nobel. In the counter-response, French President Emmanuel Macron reportedly asked the EU to activate its trade bazooka. Let me explain this, but before this, I'm telling you this banker is really smart. So the trade bazooka is an anti-coercion instrument to block American access to EU markets, further imposing export controls. These retaliatory tariffs are worth 93 billion euros. The aircraft manufacturer Boeing will suffer a loss as EU package includes 25% tariffs on the American planes. Further, it will affect all kinds of American companies, including cars, bourbon, soya beans, even Levi's jeans and Lucky Strike cigarettes. The European Union imports from the US were $355.76 billion as of 2024, and that's a pretty huge number. We all knew somewhere that the EU will never go to a war, but it has its own way to handle the situation. Though Macron has written a text to Trump for diplomacy, President Trump is still finding it cute. Yeah. The German military is pulling its reconnaissance team out of Greenland. This raises a few questions about NATO unity, but there's this thing. Europe has more to lose, given its history and the tourism which contributes to its economy. This is maybe the reason why Italy is not deploying its military on Greenland. Now, earlier Germany deployed 15 soldiers from its army, air force and navy to Greenland, but its deployment collapsed. Though this comes after the 25% tariff announced by the President Trump, I suspect that it might be because, as mentioned by Germany, it's not a nuclear country. Only France has nuclear power, but the EU is never ready for the war in any situation. However, the EU is thinking of having its relation with the Russian President Putin. And just a few days back, even the Russian president have hinted positively about this. You see geopolitics as its peak of its interest right now. If Russia joins this war against the USA, China will be in this too. And given that Europe already has cracks to the NATO alliance, it's difficult to fight against the entire world for America. It's fascinating how an ally is turned up against Europe, and the fears that China and Russia are going to be on their side. Seems Donald Trump should be nominated for the Nobel for his extraordinary efforts to unite the world. You see, for the first time in parliamentary initiative, Clémence Guetté, the vice president of the National Assembly and the member of left-wing party, may have mentioned that France should withdraw from NATO. This already tells us how much President Trump has broken the trust and damaged the relationship with its allies. However, shifting our focus to Clémence Guetté, there she gave several reasons for not in NATO, including threats against Greenland, illegal sanctions over Europe, a latest demand that NATO should spend 5% of GDP on defense expenditures, which primarily benefits the US arms industry, and several more. Now, the Trump files are not limited to the EU or other countries. It's now haunting American citizens through its immigration policy. When Trump signed the One Big Beautiful Act on July 4, it felt like he would just solve the American illegal immigration. He released the funds of $170 billion for a span of 4 years, 5 times the combined current budgets of ICE and US Customs and Border Protection. The purpose of the bill even included the construction of an additional border barrier with a surveillance system. It looks great far now till, right? But there are two things here. The ICE is approaching in inhuman ways. How? The people who are hired in the ICE are the field individuals who have been rejected from the CIA or special forces or any other kinds of job. Coming from the pedophile, this decision was expected given his history of poor judgment. Now, in between these deportation and border lines, there is a symbolic black wall on the Canada-US border, which of course tells us how much Trump hates black people, knowing his relationship with blacks. And the second thing is that even American citizens are persistently tortured in this process. Several US officials says that they are targeting migrants with no criminal record and even US citizens. So you see, the ones who voted for President Trump will also feel the pain. If I give a detailed overview of Trump's immigration policy, there will be several countries affected, including Bangladesh, Colombia, Pakistan, Nigeria, and several more from 39 countries. But I am kind of shocked when Pakistan is in this list, given that Sharif recommended Nobel for Trump. Trump again reiterated and claimed that he stopped the war between India and Pakistan, saving millions of lives and describing it as an honor. Then why is this hypocrisy? Why have you really banned much of the Muslim world? Talking of the hypocrites, look who is opening market. Saudi Arabia, the terror funding nation which even raised funds for 9/11, at least it's hinted. Opening markets for the foreign investors, this move will support inflows and improve liquidity to access terror funds more easily, I guess. This move came as Saudi Arabia wants to now establish the exchange traded funds with the Asian partners in Japan and Hong Kong. Not only that, it will even start purchasing the Sudanese gold, positioning itself as a significant player in Africa's gold trade. So it will divert its reliance on Dubai. Reaching Moscow, just 2 days ago, President Trump pushed both Kyiv and Moscow for a deal to end the war. But even after many rounds of talk, of course, without the Russian president, talks failed. Interesting, right? Now, Ukraine and US have drafted a 20-point peace proposal, but Russia has not commented on it. Not only that, just after this, Russia also launched a barrage of drone strikes against the energy infrastructure of Ukraine, leaving the people in freezing temperature without power. Coming to India and China, amidst the strained relations on Monday, a China envoy visits a Teesta project. The Teesta project, which is close to the strategic Siliguri corridor, or should I call it chicken neck. The Teesta project is necessary for Bangladesh as it is a water sharing strategy which will help Bangladesh a lot, given that India is considering withdrawing from the water sharing treaty. However, I feel this water sharing is more about chicken neck, as it is strategic area for India to counter any kinds of threats from China and instability from Bangladesh. Now that we are talking about Northeast India, let's shift our focus to Northwest turbulence. Of course, it's the beggar nation Pakistan. Though the Sharif's granddaughter-in-law is obsessed with India, I mean, look at her wearing dresses. His only intention is to be the hub of terrorism. Just days after the LAT chief warned India through the suicide bombers, Jammu and Kashmir has run an operation to fight against JM through multiple teams of army, police and paramilitary forces. There have been previous encounters in the Kahog and Najote forest in Kathua district on January 3 and 13. Now, this encounter is followed by a major counter-terrorist operations from last December, flushing out nearly 3 dozen terrorists. Since Republic Day is near, these operations have become more active, and Home Minister Shah has reviewed a high-level security meeting on January 8. Following this, Delhi has high-level security in the areas too. My last segment of news will mention Davos. Being the 56th meeting of the World Economic Forum, which will be held in Davos, this meeting will be held under a spirit of dialogue. Davos 2026 aims to provide an impartial platform for the leaders to address shared global challenges and shape innovations defining the future. Just when there are major geopolitical shifts, societal tensions in the world, and technological tensions, this meeting can be important to actually drive meaningful impact. If I look at the stance of India, it's sending its largest ever delegation, and this comes after the Global India AI Summit. Given that how PM Modi has improved the civilian life through AI, from managing traffic lights to sending complaints digitally through AI in the appropriate department, India has done its part in AI usage.
What's a better way to start this segment than discussing the bully and how they have a competition? Or would it be appropriate to call it that, especially when one is pleading and the other is not open to negotiations with no grounds? Yes, the Donald Trump-led America has another roadblock in trades with India. Of course, I'm not speaking of his fallen intellect. Republican senators Kevin Cramer from North Dakota and Steve Daines from Montana wrote a letter to the friend of Epstein, asking him, or perhaps pleading with him, to focus on relevant matters instead, such as a more than 2-month-old Indian tariff on pulse crops. As per the letter and the announcement by the Indian government, the country imposes 30% tariffs on yellow peas, quite a mockery of the USA and its negotiations. On one hand, they want one of the yellow crops, corn, to do well in India, but on the other hand, they almost ignored the tariffs it imposed on pulses. I took a good look at the letter, and believe me when I say the senators state that these tariffs are, I quote, unfair, unquote. Here's a quick look at the American tariffs on India on every Indian import, with some exceptions obviously. There's a 10% baseline duty, a 25% reciprocal tariff announced on April 2, 2025, and an additional 25% tariff effective August 27, 2025. Now, we Indians understand math. So here's a reciprocal tariff, as reciprocal literally means done in return. 30%. 10% basic custom tax and 20% agricultural cess. After giving quite some time for the administration to fixate on a trade deal, Trump should focus on what he says and abide by it, whether it be the Iran attack or when he believes, I quote, the customer is king, unquote. In that sense, Indians can help you with your exports. Our country imported a record 7.34 million tons of pulses in fiscal year 2025, just like the USA bought 32,713 barrels of crude oil and petroleum products from India. Your data, not mine. So why not focus on not starting a new war? Because I see you are neither good at stopping one, nor can you table business between two countries. Similar to your failed attempt of asking India to consider the membership of the Board of Peace, and if desired, extend it permanently for a whopping $1 billion. The man needs to get this straight. Your board is not a certain actress with an OnlyFans, and if it existed, I know you might be the first one to subscribe. Of course, Taylor Swift is no longer hot. And $1 billion? Are you in your freaking mind? You don't even understand peace. Oh wait, you think it comes after war? So Board of Peace. Here's Trump and his madness. Wage a war on other countries and talk of peace. That's how he will fulfill his New Year's proposition. Got it. By the way, there's a free trial as well. A trial of 3 years, but you need to commit within the first year, or you'll not see the drama with Donald Trump chairing the main board with the Palestinian Committee of Technocrats to govern the war-torn territory, and a second executive board to serve in an advisory capacity. But why be present or pay for it? We can actually enjoy it through the news, and that is going to be free even after 3 years. This membership sounds similar to a sunset clause, I'll say. The new Gen Z term, putting a deadline to a relationship after that, sorry, it's over. However, as it's Trump, we do not want to repeat the mistake Melania made. So sorry before even getting into the mess. You have the looted funds, or must I say Venezuelan oil, to pay whatever amount you think is suitable for the transition of the war-torn territory and to actually run it smoothly. Be on your own and cheer the house for Gaza. Asia is in no mood to give you an upper hand in conflicts here. The White House, however, must acknowledge the US territory as well, and how the gloomy sky of Trump heckles are shadowing the businesses of Maybe America Great Again, the new MAGA. After Mark Carney visited China and met with Xi Jinping, the keywords were, I quote, New World Order, unquote, and I quote, a preliminary provisional agreement, unquote. This happens to clear the path for the already competitive Chinese EVs to establish a foothold in Canada, and the Canadian government exports to be diverted from America to China, at least a significant fraction of it, especially in agriculture. Mark Carney also visited Doha, attracting investments in energy, AI, and defense sectors alongside others. Here's the red line for America, though. Even when Trump hails Carney's move to get a deal from China, on the visit, Canada and China engaged in talks about the Arctic, and both share similar interests in Greenland sovereignty. This ends with Canada's recent consideration of deploying troops in Greenland. That's exactly what America cannot deal with. A clash with China and being surrounded from everywhere while its friends doubt its intentions. Trump as a president is also failing the EV makers, the USA EV makers in Canada, a significant market for them. The Republican preacher Elon Musk must be in tears knowing he has Chinese players in his north. And given how BYD overtook Tesla's sale in 2025, Biden's non-invitation to the EV summit must have been looking weightless now. The troubles for Elon don't end here. This man-child can attract problems on his way through his foolish toys and by following the commands of Trump. For instance, switching on the internet services in Iran through Starlink. At one point in time, you say you end up badly after getting involved in politics, and other times you facilitate American access through Starlink, sending mixed signals and proving China right about the monopoly of the USA in the space-based network and how that must be tackled in the near future. Doing just that, China successfully deployed a new group of internet satellites into the lower orbit. This is the 19th batch of such satellites in the Chinese national space-based network. And it is to counter the influence of Starlink and hence the USA. The Dragon wants to deploy 200,000 satellites by early 2030s, helping it to create a global internet system. I mean, Elon and America are bad, but China, let's be honest, this is the country that pushed us in quarantine 6 years back, and I don't trust them. Same way, Elon must not trust Trump. He should understand Trump is no SpaceX venture and give him any number of goes. It will end up burning your time and investment. In fact, Elon can use the US Treasury's fall as a case study and predict his future. After Trump's Greenland threat, the Treasury showed a drop, further exemplifying the fall in the demand for American assets. This is, however, not a recent trend, as India decreased its holdings in US bonds by 21% between 31st October 2024 and 31st October 2025. Even China followed this tactic, cutting its US debt holding to the lowest in 17 years, holding $682.6 billion in November last year, while the holdings of the United Kingdom and Japan have increased by multiple folds. The exit of India and China, two of the major global economies, marks a contrasting trend to Trump's remark of being good friends with either of the leaders, be it Prime Minister Modi or Xi Jinping. Yes, he was right about one thing after all. Modi is a tough negotiator, better than him. Let's move over to national affairs. Now, knowing there are many more fuck-ups that the Trump administration is rooting for. The failed neighbor, Pakistan, has a new buyer for its rusted machines, call them chickens, that are boasted to have wings. by the Western media. Indonesia is offered up to 40 JF-17 jets by Pakistan during a high-level meeting between the Indonesian Defense Minister and the Pakistani Air Chief Marshal, who happens to be the same officer who spread false information about Pakistan's retaliatory measures against India during Operation Sindoor. It is unimaginable to what extent he might have lied about JF-17 in this closed-door meeting. Let me give you an example though. Reuters originally reported in an article, I quote, "Exclusive, Pakistan and Indonesia closing in on jets and drones defense deal, sources say," unquote, had a paragraph that acknowledged Pakistani Air Force losses during the Operation Sindoor. But this paragraph, after the Pakistani narrative contamination, is no longer in the edited version of the report. It originally said that Pakistan lost between 6 and 9 jets during this conflict. This poses a question of what is next for the beggar nation. After trying to settle Saudi Arabia's debt through JF-17, lying through its teeth about losses during the Operation Sindoor, and we all know its desperate nature to please Donald Trump by nominating him for the Nobel Peace Prize. Amusing how a terrorist nation could do that. Meanwhile, India is closely observing this deal. After almost reaching its final stages to ink a $450 million deal with Indonesia for BrahMos, the weapon that made the Pakistani jihadists remember Allah, and one which is strategic for the country to protect its sea. In addition to having a war-tested weapon, it is also significant defense deal that will strengthen or undermine the trust between the two nations, given that they share interests in countering China in the South China Sea. Now, speaking of the significant defense deal, India is negotiating with France in its procurement of 114 Dassault Rafale fighter jets, further enhancing defense cooperation between the two countries. As at $36 billion, it is the largest ever aircraft deal for France, and to be honest, the trickiest one. All of us are familiar with the Indian side, having been looking to access the Rafale source code. And while reports indicate that an API-level access is possible, the French government is hesitant to share the source code itself. Complicated terms, believe me. The French got me confused too. But the API-level access will help Indian engineers to integrate its indigenous weapons and sensors, but doesn't grant access to the features such as flight safety, threat detection, and sensor fusion. India is keen to obtain it, but even the European allies have not secured the same. Seeing how it is in Dassault's word, I quote, intellectual property, unquote. I mean, you are dealing with an Indian customer, and it is not that we have asked France to be a member of some board and put sanctions on your imports in case you decline. Oh wait, that's Trump. He's also the one who previously talked about your marriage, imitating you crying, randomly asking for a Nobel, or most recently, posting screenshots of your messages to him on the Greenland issue. I mean, really? Are you trying to be bold here? Because your NATO ally isn't creating that good of a picture for you. This picture of disagreement was also shared between India and Poland, amplified by the statement of the Foreign Minister Dr. S. J. Shankar when he met his Polish counterpart, Radoslaw Sikorski. He said, and I quote, "Poland should display zero tolerance for terrorism and not help fuel the terrorist infrastructure in our neighborhood," unquote, referring to the recent visit of Sikorsky to Pakistan in October last year. Further elaborating on the matter, he stated that he is not aware of the cross-border terrorism in the region, given how he has covered the war in Afghanistan in 1986 to 1989 and spent time in Pakistan as a journalist. Sikorsky, in return, found Zapad 2025, a joint military exercise of Russia, Belarus, and India, threatening. So you can see how the West has the same pull-out theory. Russia. Perhaps it's time for them to closely review themselves and understand that having an intelligent enemy is better than having a stupid friend. Contrasting with the West, India understands this. philosophy, and through its diplomatic relations and balancing act, is doing much better politically and economically. Proving this yet another time are the latest IMF estimates sharing a revised growth of 7.3% in the current fiscal year, which is, by the way, a 0.7% increase from its earlier prediction of 6.6%. You can say Trump wanted this, but since he cannot work on a developed economy as well as Modi's working on a developing one, he called it dead. Guess the figures keep proving him wrong again and again. Not just figures. The president and the prime ministers from different countries as well. As they want to bet on India's growth, UAE President Sheikh Mohammed met with Prime Minister Narendra Modi in New Delhi yesterday and committed to tightening trade and strategic ties between the two countries. After the 2022 economic agreement between them, the bilateral trade reached $100 billion, further expected to double to $200 billion by 2032, through focus on linking MSMEs, promoting new markets, and leveraging initiatives such as Bharat Mart, the virtual trade corridor, and Bharat Africa Setu. UAE has also agreed to invest $75 billion in India, and India has agreed to import 0.5 million metric tons of liquefied natural gas annually for 10 years, starting from 2028. Other such areas of partnerships include the creation of an international airport, a greenfield port, work on railway connectivity, focus on aviation training and aircraft maintenance facilities, as well as a smart urban township. Here's the bigger area that must have been addressed though, and why the meet is so crucial. Saudi Arabia and Pakistan just welcomed Turkey to their military alliance. And since the latter two are, let me sugarcoat it, not India's partners, and Saudi Arabia is behaving like, let me sugarcoat it again, unwisely, I think that's enough. India is trying to create a balance through a stronger partnership with UAE, a nation who is not in this peace of mind defense agreement and who has a bitterness to share with the Saudi Arabia given the Yemen. So yes, the geopolitical game of board is steamy at the moment. Trump, Middle East, Russia, China, India, and South America. Let's see what happens next. You know where. Remember, this is the evening show by The Explicit, running from Monday to Thursday, bringing an opinionated take on daily affairs, national and international. Good night.